Welcome to part 4B of this code tutorial walkthrough for the Django web application framework. We didn't finish part 4 in the last video, so we're continuing sort of a second part to finish it off, and we left off with the generic views section. So we're being introduced to the generic views concept in Django, which based on what we've read, it's a way to remove the duplicated code, which is common between many of these view functions. And the common pattern is you make a database query to get an object, and then you take that object, pass it on to a template, an HTML template, which will then in turn render the page using the objects that you supply. And this pattern, because it's so common and you have to write very repetitive code like this, they devised a concept called generic views, which allows you to write less code to do the same thing. So let's see what it looks like. So yeah. So we're gonna convert our poll app to use the generic views system, so we can delete a bunch of our code. We'll have to take a few steps to make the conversion. We're going to convert the Url Conf, delete some of the old unneeded views, and introduce some views based on the generic views. Why the code shuffling? Generally, when writing a Django app, you evaluate whether generic views are a good fit for your problem, and you use them from the beginning, rather than refactoring your code halfway through. But this tutorial intentionally has focused on writing the views the hard way until now to focus on the core concepts. You should know basic math before you start using a calculator. I agree with that approach. I like knowing the nuts and bolts, because if you don't know the nuts and bolts and you go directly to the very, very convenient way of putting things together, then you don't actually know anything about what's happening internally, and that means you are not able to troubleshoot things when they do not work anymore. Okay, so first we're gonna amend the URL conf, which is in the urls.py file under the polls subdirectory. So it's this one. And how are we going to amend it? Oh, interesting. Okay. Whereas before we had views.index, now we're changing it to be views.indexView.asView. Okay. Index view apparently is going to be a class, which has not yet been defined, but will be defined. We're doing the same thing, I believe, for and also we're changing these int question ID to int pk. Let me go ahead. Oh, this one is actually stays question ID actually for the vote one. That's interesting. We're actually not changing the vote one. That's interesting to note. Not changing this one. But we're changing the other ones. So this detail one, which used to be views.detail, is getting changed to detail view.asView. Okay, and then this views.results, that will also change to results view.asView. Okay. do it like this. All right, so we need to create these things now, I believe. So that's where this comes in. So now we're gonna open up the views.py file, and it looks like we're replacing all of these view functions, with exception of this vote method, vote function. Sorry, not method. This is just a function. We're not changing this one, as we didn't change this path definition. We're also not changing this view function, but we're sort of scrapping the other three and replacing them with these generic views, which are defined as classes. So let's do the first one. I'm going to make a class called indexView, which extends generic.listView. What's a generic? Well, it comes from the Django views. So we'll need to, from Django.views, we'll need to import generic. And the template name is going to be post/index.html. Context object name is going to be latest question list, and then get query set is a method that's going to return question dot objects dot order by pub date. This is what we had from before, for the more or less the first line of the method we had. Maybe I should keep that one just so that we have a before and after comparison. So I'm gonna copy this. There. So this is before, and this is after. So I'm gonna collapse these. So this index function is getting replaced by this index view. It seems like we just moved the various elements, like this one here, this template name, it got moved over here, and the context object name, that's just this guy, it got moved up to here, and then this query code got moved to here. And now we don't have to explicitly call the render function anymore. Yeah, that's more or less the difference, I would say. Okay, so I'm gonna comment out this one. Okay, but for detail view, there's even less code here. So let's do the detail view. Class detail view, which also extends generic.detail view. It's gonna have a model of question. Oh, interesting. So this one, we just tell it what the model class is, whereas this one, we didn't do that. But instead of that, we wrote the actual code that performs the query. So because we're controlling the code that performs the query, we didn't supply the model class, whereas here we supply the model class and I guess let the framework itself sort of figure out how to use our model class to make a query. And I bet there's like a default behavior which we're just going to use for this case. So here, let's compare these two. So here, the template name got moved here, and then all we're doing is the question is this model class goes here, and it kind of was able to infer that we should do this, I guess, and also we should do this. So the fact that this question is the name of the variable to be used in the template, that was inferred, I guess. Like what I mean is this: in this detail.html template, we make use of a variable called question, which here we define that in this context dictionary. In the new version, detail view, which is going to replace this, we don't even define this explicitly, so the name question must be inferred from the name of the model. So basically all of this code was inferred, but it's going to be inferred by this generic.detail view. So the generic, there's different things we're using, kind of. We're using a list view, and we're also using a detail view, which I suppose each of them have a slightly different behavior and assumptions it makes about how they're supposed to be used. Okay, I'll finish this off. Okay, model is also question, and then template name is polls results.html, and that replaces this one. And I would say this results one is so similar to this detail one. The only difference is the template name is different, really. Yeah. And I guess if we're translating it from this form to this and this, to this and this, we have removed, like we have lessened the amount of code you would have to duplicate, but there's still some duplication, namely that and that, which is interesting, and a sort of, well, this having to define a class, that's a little bit of overhead. Okay, I guess that's it. Am I to believe that this is to work the same way as before? Template does not exist. Polls.details. Is it detail, not details? Singular? It is singular. Okay. So everything works as before. And this is fine. And if we went to the normal detail, this is normal detail view, and then this is the top level view. Okay. So that's all of the code for part 4. I'm gonna read this part a little bit to get some more detail. We're using two generic views here, the list view and the detail view, respectively. Those two views abstract the concepts of displaying a list of objects and display a detail page for a particular type of object. Each generic view needs to know what model it will be acting upon. This is provided using the model attribute, right? Although we didn't provide it to the list view, did we? The list view, we didn't tell it what the model was. Each generic view, the detail view generic view expects the primary key value captured from the URL to be called PK. So we're changing question mark ID to PK, right? By default, the detail view generic view uses a template called app name model name dash detail.html. In our case, it would use the template pose/question detail. So there's a default. If we use their default naming scheme, that we wouldn't have needed to specify the template name even. So we'll also specify the template name for the results list view. This ensures that the results view and the detail view have a different appearance when rendered, even though they're both a detail view behind the scenes. Similarly, list view generic view uses a default template using this convention, but we overrode it with this value. In previous parts of the tutorial, the templates have been provided with a context that contains question and latest question list context variables. For detail view, the question variable is provided automatically since we are using a Django model question, and you can ask the model class for its name. Yeah. Django is able to determine an appropriate name for the context variable. However, for a list view, the automatically generated context variable is question list. To override this we provide the context object name attribute specifying that we want to use latest question list as instead. As an alternative approach, you could change your templates to match the new default context variable. Okay, I want to try that alternative, which is instead of telling it what the context object name is, I don't. And then I want to go to this index HTML and change wherever it says latest question list, I'm going to change that to question list. The problem is I don't think this will work because we actually didn't tell the generic list view what the model is. So probably this is not going to work. Oh. It did work. How did it know? Maybe it knows because the query set that I return consists of question objects. What if I change this and I returned choice objects instead? Will that break everything? No polls are available. Oh, we don't have question list. I bet we have choice list though. Yeah. Okay. I think that's probably what happened. Okay. Yes, I believe that is what happened. Like if I change this to question.objects.all, then we'll have the questions. Okay, so okay, that's fine. So we'll do it like this, and yeah, that's the end of part 4. I'll see you over in part 5.